No intro today because there's a lot to talk about. A lot of things I'm passionate about. And as you know from this channel, if you've ever followed me or seen anything I do, I'm very passionate about going to see movies and being in the movie theater. And we're in a bad state right now. And I'm here just to kind of rant and riff off why we're in this, what I feel, terrible state. And I think this weekend's a great example because you had, three movies kind of lead it in the box office revenue this week. Four, kind of, if you consider, the Looney Tunes movie in terms of like things that coming out that could interest people. And we had one of the lowest box office ever. Definitely the lowest of the year so far, 52.6 million. And if you're wondering how that stacks up, well, it's the worst box office since basically during COVID, and you have to go back to 1995, thanks to Dan Murrell for pulling out the stats. If you don't know him, Dan Murrell, great YouTuber about movies, gives really good reviews, but also does great stuff every Monday or Tuesday with the box office. Somebody to check out. I'm pulling out a couple charts and data here. He showed us that it was September in 1995, the last time the domestic North American box office had either 50 million or below. And now, granted, we were $2.6 million above that $50 million amount, but that's September 1995. I was 3 years old then. I want you to put in the comments, how old were you back then? Were you even born yet? Were you a twinkle in somebody's eye? Who knows? But it's been almost basically 29 and a half years since we've seen something this bad. And guess what? In 1995, the number of 49 point something million dollars isn't really bad because inflation obviously makes that number a whole lot higher. But here in the US, now in 2025, post many different waves of inflation, this is horrific, and it's off other weekends recently that is just actually bad. And when you look at these movies, you have an original movie concept, Black Bag, from Steven Soderbergh. You have an original movie idea, Novocaine, coming out starring Jack Quaid, like an action, a bloody action comedy. You have Mickey 17 in Second Weekend, not original, based off a book, but probably not something I'd call an IP heavily, driven movie. And then you have the new Looney Tunes product, which in itself, Looney Tunes and Max is pretty much dead. And yeah, that's kind of the box office new stuff. Obviously, Captain America was still in there. And we're seeing it. Like, everybody's saying that, you want original movies, you want different type of contents, you don't want sequels and rehashes. Guess what? You're lying because you ain't showing up for these things. And we're going to talk about all the reasons why, but you can just see it in these last few years and kind of the trends from even years before the death of original movies, OG movies. Last year, for instance, the highest grossing original movie that wasn't based off a book or a intellectual property of some sort was If. Imaginary Friends, If, with Ryan Reynolds, which was the 29th ranked movie of the global box office in 2024. It didn't even get to it. It was $10 million short around of $200 million globally. Nobody was interested in the original movies. All sequels, all stuff based off prior IPs. Like, 29th. That's alarming in so many different ways. Look at the year before, 2023. There was one movie that grossed worldwide in the top 10 that was original. It is Full River Red. And if you're wondering, what the hell is Full River Red? I don't blame you because this movie wasn't a North American domestic movie in the top 10. No, it was a movie from China, and that Chinese global audience base basically giving its whole $670,000 money run, supporting it, that had it be number 7 in 2023. The real North American domestic original movie that was the highest was Elemental at 13. So a whole lot of about better than what we had with If at 29, but 13th is your highest grossing original movie. People aren't looking for these movies. Go back 10 years, 2024. that was a big IP heavy year. We did get one movie in the top 10, and that was Christopher Nolan's Interstellar. And if you look at movies, years around there, you already see maybe going down to like 1 or 2 movies per time. But even Interstellar's amount was something that would have made it into like 6 and 7s these last couple of years with its global box office total, and that's even without inflation back then. Pick another random year I did here in global box office revenue. We're going to go 2008. Here, Kung Fu Panda, Hancock, WALL-E, 3 of them in the top 10. 2 of them in the top 4 with Kung Fu Panda and Hancock. We'll talk more about Hancock later on. Just being global box office leaders, original movies, original IPs. Something that was normal and supported more during that time. Go back some more years, 2002. Again, I just picked these years randomly off Box Office Mojo, just going here. At 7, 8, and 9, you have Signs, Ice Age, and My Big Fat Greek Wedding. Again, 3 original movies, all solidly in the top 10 of the domestic box office. And all of these years, if you go down like to 15 and 20, you're going to have 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 more original movies, where these last few years, you're grasping at straws to even have one even be in the top 20 or top 10. Like I said, last year, 29th. 29th was the highest original movie that wasn't based on IP, a book of a foreign property, a famous individual. It's insane to think about. People are not going to see original type movies, and it explains why this weekend, why Novocaine debuted at like 8.2 million, why Black Bag was struggling around 7 million, why Mickey 17, even though it's not an original IP, Mickey 17 is not that famous of a book, why it's basically bombing for Warner Brothers overall. And really what kind of helped spark this, the box office numbers are bad enough to begin with, don't get me wrong, but Celine Song, who made Past Lives a couple years ago, a very small, good indie film that got nominated for an Oscar, she got nominated for screenplay, she debuted a trailer for her new rom-com starring Chris Evans, Dakota Johnson, and Pedro Pascal, Materials. And I just saw so much on Twitter talking about how this looks stupid, how this looks bad, how I don't want to go see this in the movies. This looks boring and basic. And just the vitriol of social media there, and I'm sure it was the same thing with Facebook, Instagram, YouTube comments, whatever you want to see it. I'm sure people are having that type of reaction. And it kind of was like, I get kind of mad because I'm just like, everybody says they want a rom-com. Everybody says they want to go back to that type of stuff. But the minute you get a trailer that kind of mimics that type of stuff, it's off. We got to be negative. We got to turn the conversations into you either love it or you hate it. And if you're in the middle, you feel like you just don't want to get involved. You don't really want to be part of that conversation. And it just drives out people for movies. And I even thought to myself, I feel like this is something I saw with Anyone But You. And even, lo and behold, I looked on Twitter, when its first trailer came out all the way back in 2023 before it had its big run to start last year, people were basically saying, this looks stupid, I don't want to go see this in theaters, blah, 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 this, blah, 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 that. And Anyone But You ended up being a decent success. I think it was released at the right time of the year. I think it had good star power. But, Twitter and social media has basically turned movies into just this place of you're either like somebody who loves something or you're somebody who hates something, and if you're in the middle, you try not to get involved, and you're really only looking for things that pique your interest, like big IP movies like, say, Captain America, or Avatar at the end of the year, or Thunderbolts, or Superman, or Mission Impossible, or whatever big IP sequel movie is. That's going to be what you're probably going to go and have a chance to see. You're not going to be looking at anything original. But the other thing I think is having a major issue, and I can see it with myself, I can see it with conversations I have with friends, with family, when it comes to seeing movies, is Rotten Tomatoes. I think the Rotten Tomatoes score has programmed so many people into just looking at it, and if it is not a bona fide 95 or higher for a movie that isn't an IP-based movie, you won't see it. People just won't go and see it. If it's not a 90 or higher audience score and critic score, you have no chance of trying to drive an audience there unless something is going your way, in my opinion. And you see it this weekend. Mickey 17, Bong Joon-ho, Academy Award-winning director, writer, producer from Parasite, delivers Mickey 17, and in my review here, it's not obviously the outstanding, amazing work you get with Parasite and maybe a couple of his other movies, but I thought it was a very decent watch, very enjoyable watch, and I think that reflects pretty evenly with the Rotten Tomatoes score of a critic score of 77% and an audience score around 73%. But what I do know, talking to family members and friends over time, is the idea of a 70% movie. Do I really want to go and go to the movies to see that? Is that really interesting to me? Is that a gamble I want to take? Take next up Black Bag. Great critic scores off the bat, 97%. But those initial audience scores got 71% audience score. And again, you go back to, man, those critics probably are wrong. Do I really want to take a chance on this movie? Is it really worth my time? It's not like an 80 or 90% audience score, and it's not really based on anything that I'm attached to. I don't think I'm going to check it out. And then there's Novocaine, 86% critic score, 88% audience score, very well received, but original, not IP based, not super actor heavy casting based. Does not get much out there. And Novocaine will probably be fine because the budget is low, but just over $8 million opening for a movie that has great audience reviews and critic reviews is kind of an absurd highlight of just how bad things are at right now. And you can even look at like the Looney Tunes, which bombed this weekend, a kid-friendly movie. Maybe it had no advertising, but that had 86 and 88. Sorry, Novocaine was 82 and 87, 86 and 88. Families didn't go see that movie. It wasn't like something that jumped off to them and was like, ooh, 90% Looney Tune movie? Let's give it a chance with our kids. It didn't happen. And I think back to back, in those movies before Rotten Tomatoes, before you really could tell what was the average hive mind thinking of a movie, you just went to go see whatever it was. What were some of those original movie concepts that were in the top 10s of their years? What were their Rotten Tomato scores? And then you get going, like 2002. No Rotten Tomatoes for people to really see back then. You have Signs in theaters, number 7 in 2002. Its Rotten Tomato scores was 76% for critics, and now it's 67% for audience. And I'll tell you this, Signs, for my family, we went to see it, and people enjoyed it. We had a fun time with it. Though you can say it's stupid in some angles, but guess what? It got us in theaters. We were really interested, and we didn't have this, like, it's a horror movie with a 76% critic score and a 60 percentile audience score. This is gonna be shit, so we're not gonna go ahead and watch it. You can see it even further. A movie that is very dear to my family's heart, and I think a lot of people's heart, so much so that it has spun out into a franchise, My Big Fat Greek Wedding, and that Rotten Tomato score, 76 and 73. Can you imagine a franchise spinning out nowadays of an original movie concept with an audience that got supported, by enough people it would spin out with a critic and audience score in the mid-70s? No, that's like a score where you go and die and nobody goes to see it, and you just hope that you get some streaming deal that will show your movie. You could try to make your money back, but more chances than not, you don't make the cut. You're not interesting enough. You don't have the good enough scores to give you a chance to begin with. Hancock, that was number 4 in 2008. Will Smith, original movie. Superheroes, yes, but it was an original type movie. It scores 42 and 49. Could you imagine a potential blockbuster right now having under 50% critics and audience score and still being one of the top 5 movies worldwide of the year? No, those movies die instantly. Those movies see like drops in the 70% in week 2 and week 3. Kind of similar to what you're getting with Mickey 17. They bomb. But guess what? When you don't have Rotten Tomatoes telling you what the hive mind thinks, people will go, they'll make judgments, they'll find fun with it. You won't say it's the best movie in the world, but guess what? You had a good time, you had an experience, you saw something there, and you saw it for yourself. Even some of my favorite movies of all time, like Ocean's 11, came out in the mid-2000s. 83% critic score, 80% audience score. That would not cut it nowadays. It just wouldn't cut it nowadays. One of my mom's favorite movies of all time, and probably in her top 10, Armageddon. Critic score of like a 43%, audience score of a 73%. You think that movie would ever have any traction anywhere in the theaters nowadays? No, people would see that score, including my mom, who loves Armageddon. She would see that critic score and be like, I'm not taking a chance on that movie. And it's so mind-boggling how this, I think, fun statistic that started out as like an interesting thing, and you can kind of debate stuff, has just programmed so many of our family, our friends, our colleagues, our peers, our elders, our younger people, that if it's not a certain level, you won't go ahead and try it out. You won't go ahead and see it. Maybe unless it's on a Netflix and Max and Disney Plus or Hulu, which we'll talk about in a second. But you won't go out into the theaters and try it. And most likely, if you're not going out to see it in the theaters, there's a very small chance you're going to go ahead and see it on streaming or something like that, I feel, nowadays. And I just think these are clear examples. Like, all of those movies have done well in their box office. All of the have had a cultural impact. And you can just see with those scores, they wouldn't survive today. Because, like, almost all of those scores are worse than the three movies that bombed this week. You know, Mickey 17, 77, 73. That's basically in line with My Big Fat Greek Wedding. Black Bag is 97, 71. None of those movies are even close critic-wise, and that's even probably the higher of the average size of the audience scores. Novocaine, 82 and 87. That's higher. That's in the 80s. These movies aren't in the 80s. Novocaine was miles better than Hancock. But nobody went to see it. Nobody's going to go see it. Why? Because they see a basic horror movie, horror action-y type movie. They don't see it attached to any big IP. It's not like it's a movie that's in a franchise, that's in a system. It's not like it's a spin-off of John Wick or James Bond or blah, blah, blah. And it doesn't have the big action story, even though I think Jack Quaid is proving himself to be a very good actor if you give him a chance. It doesn't have that. So you know what happens? It doesn't do well at the box office, and it's only going to be in theaters for like 3 weeks because movie theaters can't afford to keep it in there because nobody's going to see it. And if nobody goes to see a movie, are you going to hold that spot in your theater, or are you going to go ahead and give it to Snow White and Minecraft, which even though maybe with their number, the money they've invested in their movies, it's going to be a disappointment, will still put more butts in seats than anything here that we've talked about today. It's why everybody's who blames the theatrical window. It's like, no. How can theaters keep movies in there for 45 days if nobody goes to see these types of movies? If even in its fourth or fifth week, Captain America Brave New World is getting more people in seats, or as many people in seats as these movies that have opened up the last 2 weeks, that are generally good, decently reviewed movies that I think people would enjoy if they take the chances, but they're just not doing it. It's not interesting. They don't make movies that are good anymore. The movies beforehand weren't great either if you look at the Rotten Tomatoes score and critic score. They weren't standout amazing movies. The difference is people went to the theater, they took a chance on things, and guess what? The beauty of art is some people like stuff, some people don't like stuff, and it doesn't even have to be 50-50 sometimes. You make a chance, you took a chance to be entertained, and guess what? More times than not, you're accepting of things that are entertaining because it's just there, the experience. And there are things with movie theaters they can improve on. I know here they're putting in the recliners, and that makes a big difference. But people need to improve in the movie theaters. We live in the TikTok culture. We're at home where people can just swipe up on something they're not interested in. And that's kind of what happens when you look at movies. Is that kind of interesting? My first 30 second gaze, not really. Swipe up, never think about it again. And I don't know how movie theaters are going to survive. I don't know how studios eventually are going to survive. I mean, you have your streaming services, and I think that's another big problem. You have things like, obviously Netflix, Disney Plus, Max, Paramount Plus, Amazon Prime. There's so much new stuff being made that's being putting out on these streaming services that is also some of these lower quality stuff that people are content watching at home, and that fills that void. Because you wonder, man, why does Netflix makes these movies that get no good tomato scores, and why do they waste their time? Because guess what? They know the average person will be entertained if you put it in front of them. We just need people to stop sitting in front of their televisions and watching some of this stuff and taking a chance on these movies that people are putting out in theaters, because when your theaters go away, jobs go away, the money for studio systems go away. Franchise IP will only be able to sustain the business long term for a short amount of time. Movie theaters are not going to be able to survive off waiting for the next big franchise movie to come, because those franchise movies like Captain America Brave New World are also taking their hits and people are becoming less interested. You need to find the new franchise or IP to reboot and to try to build numbers off of. I mean, this is just such a terrible time to be around movies. And I just have nothing to blame it. You know who's to blame for the movie theaters eventually going away, for movies to eventually, be on life support soon? All of us. Us people first. But what is helping us people at making those decisions? Streaming services, Twitter, social media, TikTok, Facebook, whatever you want to call it. And I think one of the biggest things, that Rotten Tomatoes score, because too many people look at it and they say, that doesn't look outstanding and amazing and the best thing I'm ever going to see in my life, so I'm not going to take a chance and watch that. Where in the past, you just took the chance because you weren't told if the hive mind thought it would be amazing or not. Yeah, this is just my video. I just put it out there for you. Put your thoughts down below. I'm just so tired of seeing more and more bad news every Monday or Tuesday on Dan Murrell's channel when it comes to the box office report and just how bad it is out there, and seeing online people being like, well, they don't make interesting movies. Oh, they don't make anything good. Look at these Rotten Tomato scores. You just don't go see movies. And if that's the way the world's going to go, that's the way the world's going to go. But if you can't start seeing that these, the hive mind mentality, the Rotten Tomatoes mentality is causing these issues, I don't know what else to say. We're not going to have much longer, to enjoy theaters like this. AMC, Regal, they're going to go out of business soon. And what investor is going to come in and try making movie theaters work when these other companies are already trying to bend over backwards to make it happen? Tell me your thoughts down below, and I'll see you later this week for Snow White's review.